All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Collapsing with Casey. Thanks to Justin Leso, my friend Justin, because we've actually met. This is really cool. And I met Guy and Pauline, but I hadn't met. Oh, I did meet them. I had lunch with them one time as of our last interview. But Justin, of course, we want to dedicate this show to our friend Jeff Antonson, who took his life less than a week ago. Jeff was I never got to meet Jeff, but we talked on the phone just about every day. I think you met Jeff, correct?
I had only been really in texting him and talking to him through social media pretty extensively for the last couple months.
And I know you had, reached out and offered to come up and hang out with him, and
yeah, I had asked him because Jeff was struggling, a month or two ago with feeling isolated and feeling stuck. And I asked him if he wanted to, go to the park and talk, and I would drive up there because New York's only a couple hours from me. And he said he wasn't ready to see anybody at the time. So I said, I respect that. I'm not going to, force myself into your social bubble. So I just kind of let the issue go. And I did feel kind of bad that I didn't try to go there, but
yeah, that should have been. I remember you telling me that, and that should have been a kind of a warning for me. But I didn't. I didn't really set in, because when I talked to him, we talk about what we would talk about exit plans and stuff, and but not for now. For later when it's time. But unfortunately, his breakup. That was what, and that's something I think we should mention, is this wasn't a climate related suicide, at least not for the most part. If there was any part of that, it was negligible in comparison. He was grieving over a breakup, and so he was just heartbroken, and couldn't hang on any longer. So he took some pills, and I was like, fucker, we never talked about that. That's a great idea. I'm sure, I hope, and I'm sure he went out pretty peacefully. That's all I ask. I asked my friends to please let me know so we can. I want to say, I want to be able to have that goodbye with people when their time is up, right? And so I was pretty bummed out about that. But there's also when you let your friends know, yeah, they're probably going to try to talk you out of it, and it could be too big of a pain in the ass, and you just got to do what you got to do, right? So, yeah, we're dedicating this show to Jeff, and we miss you, we love you, and we know he's in a better place. He's with Jesus now, dancing on a puppy cloud. But yeah, and just it sucks, and Justin, you've had a shit fucking go at life. I think you got a big heart, and it sent you on your path to borrowing a bunch of money for school, right? To go to college, raised up a bunch of tuition fees that you'll never be able to afford to pay back, right?
Absolutely.
And I was actually telling a friend about you today, because I was telling him we were doing this interview, and I was like, yeah, but the good news is he won't have to worry about paying that back. The bad news is we're all going to die soon. So, take it however,
If my creditors are watching,
is it half full or is it almost full? Yeah, it's almost full. Or half empty. It's half more than full. That was stupid.
any of my debtors or creditors are watching, I'm definitely paying all my dues.
Oh, right. Check's in the mail, right? Just got to buy a stamp, and I'll get it out. So take us through some of that. Take us through, your history, what got you into, obviously, learning about climate change and human extinction. I'm trying to keep it together here myself. It's such a heavy topic.
Yeah.
And it's different because you and I have met, so there's like a different connection. So it's fucking hard. It's fucking hard to, talk to this shit about your friends with your friends that you've met that are on the same level of understanding, right? But talk about, all of that too, and
Okay.
how you kind of got to this point in your life.
So I guess to start out, I was born in Philadelphia. I spent the first 12 years of my life there, breathing air that is far more toxic than I ever could have imagined. And I'll never know how much that's affected my development. And then I moved to New Jersey and now I'm here still. I spent the last 15 years here. I went to college at Rowan University, starting in 2011. And that was another funny thing because at some point when I was going to school, they had closed the water fountains because they tested positive for lead. And these were water fountains that I had been drinking out of. And I was like, oh, cool. Not only did I grow up in a really toxic city, but I've been drinking lead at college. So it's a wonder I can even talk complete sentences at some point. But so I was in school. I was really into geography as a kid, other countries. I thought it was so interesting that people from America were so different than everywhere else. So I kind of went down that kind of rabbit hole. And in college, I studied, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I bounced around. I wanted to be an engineer at first, which is funny now. But I ended up sticking to sociology and got really interested in environmentalism. I learned about the concept of a carbon footprint. I learned things about that the amount of stuff, even myself, the average American has equals about 20 or 30 humans in Kenya or Africa. There's sometimes even more people. And that the amount of things, the amount of food and fuel and resources we consume per person is so much greater than, somebody from a different country that is not as developed of a nation. So I started going into all that stuff. I was really into researching sea level rise before I really knew about the whole predicament. So I was one of those people that, and not just because I care about whether New York gets flooded, it was more so because I was concerned studying sociology about different groups of people. I'm talking about the Pacific Island nations. I'm talking about the Solomon Islands, Kiribati, Vanuatu. I was concerned because their islands are getting flooded now from melting ice. So not that really it's going to affect most Americans, but so I was researching a lot of that, and that kind of rabbit hole in 2016 led me to a documentary that Bill Nye filmed that had an interview in it, as you know, with Guy McPherson. And I was a super senior, which is a fifth year senior in college. And I was watching that and I was like, that guy just said there's not going to be a human on the planet in 2030. And I just paused the video and rewound it and just heard it again. And I was just like, in my head, it didn't sound like it was wrong. It sounded like everything I had been learning about, Great Britain pushing indigenous people off their islands to mine them or making them go downriver and then ruining the whole river and then killing all of the fish and tree. It just kind of it went in lockstep with everything I had been learning about how through our history, humans have just excelled at taking all of the resources and destroying all the species. And it just I was trying to fight it at first, but the more I watched Guy's interviews and his lectures, the more I kind of understood the science. I had no idea about permafrost and methane and all the lovely things we're going to discuss. And from there on, I was like, cool, I just spent $100,000 to go get a job I'm not going to get, and I will die before I get the job or pay the bill.
That's a slap in the face, right?
As I could put it.
No. So now you've got all this debt. The money the job that you got out of college was, kind of a good job in a way, but because it was what you went to school for, but the pay was shit. You couldn't pay off your student loans, obviously, because the pay was too shitty. And then on top of that, it was dangerous with what you were doing, dealing with troubled kids, right?
Yeah, after college, I got a job at a DIFUS shelter, which is when parents lose custody of their child before they go to foster care. They have to go to a shelter. They have to have their medicals taken. They have to make sure they're not a threat to anybody or suicidal. So I spent my first year and a half in social work working with those groups of kids. And it was very difficult. I had a lot of times I had to rush kids to the emergency room because they cut themselves open and they got into a fight. One kid almost took his finger off throwing the trash out because he was mad and he threw the trash bag and a lid of a can caught him and almost took his whole finger off. So I had a lot of nights where I had to stay late or to stay in the hospital. And then I transitioned to after school care, which I thought was going to be a little bit easier, but I worked in Camden, which anybody that doesn't know the Philadelphia area, it's kind of the forgotten city of New Jersey where there's a lot of corruption and impoverished people that the state kind of neglects. And because of that, there's a lot of crime. There's a high rate of gun violence and stuff like that. So I was working with kids who I was having to play the role of a psychologist, basically for $13 an hour, talking to kids that were 16 that saw the best friend murdered. There was a fight at school, and they took the fight outside of school, and the other kid just started shooting them in the chest. 14-year-old kids killing each other. And it's like, I don't blame them. I blame the system that keeps them down and compresses all of these families and doesn't give them an outlet. So I'm not ever saying that I blame any of those children. I just feel really awful that I had to help kids that had been sex trafficked, kids who had, violence, sexual violence, physical violence in their families from a very young age. And it kind of, in a way, put in perspective for me the notion of collapse. I speak from a very privileged place when I talk about everything falling apart. And realistically, most of the 50 American states, there's a community you can drive to and see collapse firsthand.
Oh yeah. Yep. It's happening now. Did you think that it was going to happen this fast?
No. And even I was somebody who followed extensively guy referencing Wisław Maslowski's prediction that there would be an ice-free Arctic in 2016 plus or minus 3 years. So every year after 2016, we were in that plus or minus range. Was when I was working as a social worker, and we had some really hot summers. There was a really hot and humid summer in New Jersey where with the heat index, it was about 99 or 100, but the heat index with the humidity was like 109. And I couldn't even go out in the morning to sit, in the gazebo and just read a book because I was dripping and sweat. It was too hot to be outside. And I was thinking about that and I was like, oh, this is really, things are escalating. But there was always this kind of ending, kind of like happy chapter ending to the year where we would still be here and the Arctic ice didn't vanish all the way and it got cold again. And I could kind of go like this and breathe a sigh of relief. This year, I'm feeling a lot differently from a few reasons, not one of them being the whole pandemic economic downturn. And that's off of the back of 2008 recession that never really ended, as I and a lot of other, even economists talk about that. And then the whole situation with methane and the lack of refreeze and the lack of new sea ice in the Arctic. So I was a little disjointed, but
There's a lot of, what was the last thing you said? You kind of broke up there.
no, I didn't mean to be disjointed. There was just so many factors coming up now that it's just kind of like a ticker in my head. I'm just thinking of more as we go. Like record-breaking hurricane season in a La Nina, record-breaking temperature years in a La Nina year, record-breaking ocean temperatures in a La Nina. Every couple seconds, I'm just thinking of more things that are like, wow, the snowball was so big rolling down the mountain, it's almost the size of the mountain at this point.
Yeah, and if so, in a La Nina year, the oceans absorb the heat. In an El Nino, they release the heat, and that heat transfers to land. So had we have been in a El Nino year, we might not be here, right? We could have cooked, right?
The other interesting thing to note, Joey, is when you look on Google or Wikipedia for just a generic explanation of ENSO, the El Nino Southern Oscillation, it says that it typically takes 2 to 12 years to complete that cycle. And when you say 2 to 12 years, usually you think somewhere in the middle or toward the end. It's a long cycle. But as you remember, 2016 and 2019 were very vicious El Nino years. So that cycle went from 2016 to 2019, which was only 3 years. And now we're looking at going into a neutral condition that leads to a potential El Nino at the end of this year, which would be another 3-year cycle in 2022. So I feel like humans with our, greenhouse gas effect and heating the oceans, 93% of the heating goes into the ocean, something like that, which I didn't even know until recently. And I feel like we've just sped up this process where the ocean has to, it's like a battery, and we're supercharging the battery so much that it has to discharge faster and faster.
Yeah. And that's obviously catastrophic, because we know that 3C is human extinction. And I just found out that 4C, the trees are not just dead, they're fucking gone. At 4C they burned. So, that if we're this close, what do you think we're at temperature wise? I think we're at somewhere around 2.3C running a fever, the global average temperature that gave us this planet at 13.5C global average prior to 1750. And if we're at a little over 15.5C, that's a pretty bad fever, right? I mean, if you don't get that shit back down, you're going to die. People don't like to admit or understand or whatever that the earth is a living, breathing organism. We've depleted the Amazon. The Amazon is now a carbon sink. It's a carbon emitter. It's not a carbon sink, right? And our air conditioning unit, known as the Arctic ice, and Antarctica too, but the Arctic, because most of the land is in the northern hemisphere. We need that Arctic ice to keep us from going full on hot house, right? And when that melts, and as you said, we could lose all that just in $100,000 melt. I keep saying dollar. 100,000 square kilometer melt days.
Dollars are important, right?
for now.
All right, just for today.
It's funny how, when the economy crashes and people finally realize, we can't use the money to fix this. We can't use the money to go to the store because there's nothing at the store, shit like that. It's gonna be really funny, telling people, did you not ever realize money was fucking fake all along? This is real life now. Not fucking fantasy land, American dream bullshit.
One of the first times I played Monopoly as a kid, I was looking at the colored money, and I feel like in my head I asked everyone, what is the difference between this paper and a dollar? It's just colored paper.
Mm-hmm. Whatever's written on it, the amount that's written, that's
designed, the pattern of the ink dictates its value.
Yeah,
it's such a absurd thought.
It is. It's everything is just so absurd. Really gnarly to talk about. What are your thoughts on how much time do you think, or what do you think what are you expecting to see, and how do you think it's all going to go down?
So I feel like with a question like that, it's the best way to answer it is with multiple answers. I kind of look at us like we're up Shit's Creek without a paddle, but the creek we're going down separates into a number of different tributaries. One of them has a 300-foot waterfall. And one of them has a 200-foot waterfall. One of them has a 50-foot waterfall. Either way, you're going for a drop. It's just how hard and how far do we crash? So a lot of that has to do with the economic situation, because it's so hard. I can't even think of a good metaphor. It's like the economic situation and the climate situation are so far more conjoined than people understand.
Yeah.
The reason the climate situation is bad is because of the economic situation. We've had the same way of capitalist living all of this time. Now it's so tied in. It's like you can't have, you have, I don't know, two pieces of glass on top of each other. If you put something heavy enough to break the first piece of glass, it's going to bottom out and break through the second one. Whether the top glass is our economy or the top glass is the Earth's climate, both of those panes of glass shatter at the same time. So it's for me, it's like, do we have a situation where the real, and Guy talks about the ready that day delivery system. I worked at a grocery store during the pandemic, and boy, did I see that how janky the supply chain is working there, because there were things that took weeks or months to get into the store after they were sold out. When the WHO declared the pandemic, all of the food was bought in 3 or 4 days because people freaked out, right? Because we've never been, as a general American populace, we really haven't been confronted with collapse the way we kind of were last March, and just a small taste of it. And seeing the ship get stuck in the Suez Canal, and I read today that Egypt is holding that ship there until the company that owns it pays some sort of reparation for halting global trade. So if anybody's ordered anything that's on that ship, they're never getting it. Like somebody could have bought a car that's on that ship in the dealership that it's not going to get them. Like, so those kind of things are already starting. And then when we talk about the fact that the first blue ocean event is potentially this year, and the ramifications of the jet stream maybe not existing in the way it has for all of human existence, like when you talk about those kind of, they sound like just philosophy, but those are real concrete facts. Like if if the ice melts, there's no telling what seasons are going to look like ever again. And I'm in the camp that the latent heat effect of the blue ocean is, I hear a lot of talk from climate scientists that aren't all the way to the point that me and you are, and some of our friends like Guy McPherson talk about after the blue ocean event, how many years will the ice not, how many years of a blue ocean event will we have till we don't get a refreeze? That's not it at all, Chief. The blue ocean event stops the refreeze. If we're lucky, we get 1 year of refreeze, but it's not coming back after that. It's going to be a hothouse Earth with a hothouse Arctic Ocean that you could go swim in and drink mojitos by the beach.
Right. We're seeing lightning up there. That's ridiculous. We're fucked, man. We're totally fucked. And yeah, like if we go blue ocean event in August, September is still hot. I remember September used to start fall, like the first week of September, because my birthday is September 2nd. So I would remember. And then with Halloween, October 3rd, 31st, Halloween was usually too cold. Like you're a kid and you put on your costume and it's like, oh, I got to put stuff on underneath it because I can't it's too cold. I can't just wear my costume. I'm going to freeze to death. Now, our first cold day was October 31st. That was our first cold night because the day was nice. And then it got cold. Finally, it started cooling off, and it was like the evening of October 31st. I was like, how shitty is that for the kids? That, just give them one more day of warmth. So they can go enjoy trick or treating. But I mean, that was COVID, so there wasn't a whole lot of trick or treating going on anyway.
I remember that too. Pre-COVID, I was at a Halloween party at an old apartment a couple of years, like 2 or 3 years ago, and it was warm out. People were outside because everyone was sweating in the house because it was in the 70s on Halloween. The scary thing to me, Joey, is people tell me, including Guy, that on average, most of the month to month, we've had warmer than average months over the last 30 years.
Yeah.
I'm going to be 28 in a week, and I've never if that science is true, I've never lived a month that was colder than average. And yet in my lifetime, I can recognize when it was colder and how hot it is now. The cold comes and it's not as bad, or it's like a really brutal cold. In New Jersey, we had a record over New Year's week a couple years ago, and it was -2 or 3, which doesn't sound cold to a lot of people, but where I live, that's apparently really cold. And I haven't seen a lot of temperatures like that since then. I've seen very little snowfall the last 3 or 4 winters, where you can count 1 or 2 times a month that snow accumulated and landed on the ground. And that's not normal at all. When I was younger, I remember snow being a constant, and you had to keep shoveling because more would pile up over the winter because it was so cold that the snow stayed in place. Nowadays, it's just, it might snow, it might turn into rain.
Yeah, and that's I'm sure most people listen to this know, but that's because the jet stream being all wonky now because we've melted most of the ice. We've just cooked the planet. That's part of the part of the symptoms when the Earth is running a fever of over 2 degrees um, too warm and continuing to warm. So the jet stream is, it's got to go. It usually doesn't cross the equator. Usually, you got the it's almost like 2 jet streams, right? You got the upper hemisphere and the lower hemisphere, but and it's looking a little less crossing on the equator lately because we're not into summer yet, or at least like we're not deep into spring. But there's all these storms forming like everywhere. You look at Antarctica right now, it's just there's just swirly after swirly after swirly, totally outlining, and some of that's going into there's like 3 storms going into Australia,
Yeah.
and 2 of them are right next to each other, and it looks like they're just gonna be like dancing outlaw hurricanes paired up, and then there's a third one right behind, and there was a big fucker right off the Atlantic coast, up north, and that thing was huge. And then another one off of Alaska that was huge. And then some swirlies up in Arctic as well. Um, in fact, if you want to go through and look at some of that stuff, I will I'll do post in that way. You can take us through some because you're real. One thing that's really cool about you, and this will help me out, is how you know how to look all that stuff up. And do
Yeah, we can do that. I was just looking on social media today and yesterday. It's almost like you have to. It's like one of those memory tests. Can you remember 5 things? Like I saw a water spout hit Florida. I saw a thunderstorm that looked like hurricane force rain winds blowing past the hotel room in a different part of Florida. I saw a volcano that hadn't erupted in over 40 years in St. Vincent in the Caribbean, I believe, erupted yesterday. Just like climate headlines, you have to kind of just, oh, do you remember this card today? Like there's so many of them now.
it's really too much to keep up with. Like, right? Like, no one person can be like, oh, this is the greenhouse gas levels today. This is how much ice melted yesterday. Um, there's so much going on and like we talked about, everything's interconnected. People can't grasp that, right? They can't understand how interconnected everything is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's scary, dude. I'm really nervous about what's coming. And if I loved my job more, I'd probably be a little more pissed off. But work sucks. I'm tired. I'm ready. I'm not ready, because fuck, I don't want to see all my friends die.
Right.
And my
Absolutely.
animals, and
It's the hard thing about being frustrated at a system that clearly isn't working and is killing each and every one of us. You want it to stop, and you want the suffering and the people's names that you'll never know in a factory that died overworking themselves, you know, their children that died in a factory overwork. All those people suffering, you want that to stop. But at the same time, you know, myself, you, a lot of, you know, people, especially Americans, we have such a strong privilege that we don't really want to be without it. I don't want to be without it. I don't want to be without the internet, the ability to have conversations like this with you, the ability to have phone conversations, social media conversations, like the ability to share this data in the small window of time we have left. Like that's a privilege of having the internet and good electricity. And that's all going away. But it's such a cognitive dissonance because we have this, you know, natural kind of selfish idea that we, you know, we want to still have some time with each other, but you know, the world is on fire.
Yeah, it's not going to allow us that. And I'm seeing in the Atlanta area, we had good rain today, so no issue with fires. But in about 2 more days, that's just going to be dried up. The sun's taken so hot into the ground that it's drying everything out. Where I'm afraid that because we're getting fire warnings or watches, not warnings, but fire condition watches, fire burn bans. And it's only we don't normally have this. It maybe deep summer, midsummer, in a drought, you'll see that. No, we're not even in a. We are kind of in a drought because even though it's been raining regularly, either we're using more water because we've grown that much more, but it's also evaporating faster. There's a big lake right by us, a big park, and that thing's down even after it rained today. And we've had regular rains, but if it doesn't rain for a few days, you'll see that thing drop like 3 or 4 feet just over no time. And I'm like, I drove up by it today, and I was just like, this summer, this place is going to be a dust bowl. That all that water is going to be gone, and that's drinking water for I think Gwinnett County on the other side of Atlanta. I don't know why they pump it all the way up there. It doesn't make sense to me, but it's a state park, and it's somebody's drinking water, and it doesn't go here. That's what's weird about it. Speaking of what? Oh, go ahead.
Um, I'm not entirely sure on the science, so if anyone wants to correct me if I'm wrong on this, feel free. But I'm pretty certain that you know, with rain and the root system and all, a tree can only take so much water to nourish itself. So when you're in a really dry season and the ground is kind of cracked and dry and the trees are drying up because there's no water, and it rains really bad randomly, that tree can only still undertake the same amount of water as if it was normally raining and it normally was a healthy soil. So I think we're seeing more abrupt flooding in drier areas from that because not only are we losing trees at a fast rate and vegetation that has roots that lock in the water and stop landslides and mudslides, but we're seeing more rain than is necessary and needed for these trees to be nourished getting dropped in these kind of rain bombs and these kind of freak storms. And I've noticed kind of the weather change over the last decade here where we'll get less rain, but we'll get faster storms and heavier downpours. Where I'll turn around and it pours for 20 minutes and then it doesn't. And that's weather I was used to seeing in places like Florida when I was, you know, vacation down there. Where it would rain really bad for a half hour and then you'd have the steam radiating off of the asphalt. Like I started seeing that in New Jersey more and more. It's just like,
Yeah, here too. I lived in Florida back then too. So it was, yeah, you're right. That was kind of a Florida thing. And shit, now it's gone all the way up north. Good point. Really weird.
yeah. Did you want to take a look at any of the null school data or anything?
Sure, yeah. I'll let you drive because you're really onto that kind of stuff, and I fumble around and I play around on it a little bit, but I'm definitely no educator when it comes to any of the satellite data and and the websites, like AXA and CAM and all that. mean, you're one of my go-to guys on that info.
Can you see this?
Yeah, so there's that storm I was talking. It's actually gone further off the coast, up in off of New England.
So that's surface level Earth null. This is earth.nullschool.net for anyone that's curious. And you can
Yeah,
access a number of different I guess overlays of the air, the ocean. There's a particulate radar. There's a lot of interesting things, and this is a good way that for the last couple of years I track hurricanes and their projection, because it projects out. There's the Australian one we were talking about right there, and then you can check different air pressure, like higher up. I'm not entirely up on all the terminology. I just know fairly well how to navigate it. So this is higher up air pressure. Storms like that one we're looking at right here, I think has a lot to do with the jet streams becoming loopy and wavy. Like I can't even tell this is a jet stream. This looks ridiculous. The jet stream is supposed to look like, whether it's straight or it's curved, it's supposed to look like kind of like a jump rope.
yeah.
The Earth. I can't even.
It's like it's drunk. It doesn't know which way it's
So
going.
that bow right there, that's like the jet stream, like that. It's just so unnatural, and that has a lot to do. I'll show you with the website that I use. It's called Climate Reanalyzer. This one, and this has a good. You can see where this is temperature anomaly. So this is all the place where it's warmer than average. It's not for nothing. That's a huge. But there's also a place where it's colder than average. So that's just like that patch. These patches are potentially melting off you guys way earlier than.
Look at how hot it is in the Arctic.
Yeah.
No wonder we're getting 100K melt days.
So the line between blue and green is freezing point. So I believe that's in Celsius. So all of these is where it's warm right now. And ice can melt at freezing point because it's a lot of salt content. I believe, yeah, it takes 28 Celsius or 28 Fahrenheit to freeze ice with salt, I believe.
Yeah, because it's salt water. It doesn't freeze at 32 after 0C, right? It's got to be a little colder.
Yeah. So if you go to wind, surface, and you look at temperature, you can kind of see when you go to wind and temperature that the different colors are directly correlated with where the jet stream is. It's like a barrier. So I always thought that was really interesting, that these kind of extreme temperature swings are directly related to the jet stream being drunk, as you said, and the melting of the Arctic. So the first data set I used to use when I was a bit younger was the Danish Meteorological Institute's projections, and these are models. They're not. See how it says modeled at the top? I always specify that because this is not like a definite overview of the ice, and these kind of projections use estimates. So I think that ice is actually way thicker than it really is in real life. So the next one I started using to offset that was the Navy, the United States Navy Arctic data. So you can see here this sea ice looks a lot thinner than the ice we were just looking at. Right?
Yeah.
And another interesting thing about this ice, I'm going to try to zoom in. So when we talk about the age of Arctic ice, typically the thicker ice is older. It's been there more years. It's got more time to freeze every year. So in the last 3 or 4 years of looking at data like this, I've never really seen it be so thin where there was no red ice like this. It used to be out to here, and it's, again, another indicator that the jet stream is crazy and wobbly is it's colder than average over here. There's little pockets of ice that are bigger than they should be. and yet this ice is shallow and this ice is shallow. This looks way worse than it should be. This should be all this color, and it's like not even here. This GIF is the last 30 days, and then it projects about 7 or 8 days after. So you're seeing the last 20 days and then an estimate of what the computer data thinks is going to happen. And as you see, it's kind of freezing a little bit and also melting, but I think there's going to be more melting than refreezing.
Yeah.
Another indicator I use of extent, this is the Japanese satellite data. This is JAXA. And this graph here is 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s average. And then you got 21 to 2000. There's another loop, another projection you can use that's only the lowest data. So you can take some of these off. This is 2012, 2019, and this year. And this is the data I've been taking notes on. Just as an aside in these kind of charts, because this kind of stuff, because using the 4 worst years of ice extent is not conservative. No scientist will tell you that. That's a good indicator of conservative data, but it's a good indicator of ice that's melting really fast, and it's going to be a record low. So I use this data specifically because if you average all the bad years and this year is still worse than the average of all the bad years, you could comfortably say it's not looking that good.
Right.
Where we are now, I'm gonna take all of these off and just look at this year. So if you just look here, when you put it through the whole year, it doesn't look that great. This kind of mountain shape pattern is supposed to happen over a way longer period of time. And you can see that. Look at 2020 and then look at this year. You see the difference? Look at 2012, which is the worst record low, and then look at this year.
That's a good point, man.
The drop is so much more pronounced.
Yeah, it's like
we're already seeing 100K
Jesus.
April, which is not that out of common, but it is abnormal to see them in a row.
And because we're already at such a
Right.
low that's not sustainable.
When you put all these years together, it kind of looks like, oh, the situation isn't as bad. I always take off the averages because the averages skew the data upwards when that's not really the case. So the year I'm doing is 2021. You can't see it all the way because there's so many other years in here. But that little one peeking out, that's us. So you can see where my arrow is. We're heading downward at a point where the rest of the graph is still going in this kind of
more linear trajectory, but we're entering a straight down trajectory.
Yeah.
Just like like a reverse hockey stick. All the greenhouse gas levels are off the charts, going straight up, just like the ice is going straight down from this year's.
That's the other thing. Thank you for reminding me earlier about the CAMS data, the Copernicus satellite from methane. So as I was telling you, I put the graph from Tuesday, and that goes all the way because I wanted this. I don't want any projections. I want actual data.
Right.
This goes all the way to here, and then after there, it's just an estimation. So this is surface level, and as a lot of people don't know, humans create more methane than global warming does right now. The problem is at the point where humans don't create the most methane, we're fucked. Because there's never been this much methane in the atmosphere, whether we're making it or whether we're fracking and leaving wells leak it. or we're pushing it out of the permafrost. I mean, you know, any gun that shoots you, you're still dead. Doesn't matter if it's a pistol or a sniper rifle, right?
Right.
So this is surface level data, and the concerning thing about this is this is the ESAS, the Eastern Siberian Shelf. And you can see there's kind of yellow wisps.
Sure. Yeah.
And again, the thing that freaked me out is this is the surface level. I guess if you look at methane from there, it looks way worse. So I don't know why people don't look at the higher atmosphere methane, because
as a greenhouse gas, high up is where it's blanketing and trapping the heat from the sun in our atmosphere and warming the planet, right?
I could be wrong about that. I'm not sure why people don't look at the higher levels of methane, but like I don't think it should be darker color the higher you go up, right? I could be wrong. Please, anybody interject at some point afterwards, because we're doing the best we can navigating the actual truth, half truths.
Yeah, because
it looks kind of bad from the top.
There's nobody that does this. There's nobody that, you know, publicly, like I know, you know, there's scientists and citizen scientists and people like us that look at this, but you know, I try to tell people, like, that's the stuff that should be on the news, not, you know, Georgia lost all its voting rights. Voting is fucking done. That was fucking decades ago. It's over. It's all bullshit now. Fucking just stop it, right? But no, that it's going to be all about voting and uh you know, the the racism that's going on, which is fucking awful, because people are fucking morons and they love to be spoon-fed bullshit. So it's like, yeah, we'll blame that on the black people, you know, blame COVID on the Asians and, you know, Koreans and China, and you know, it's so fucking stupid that people buy into that shit, but it works, right? It totally works, because that's how we're fed, and it just divides everybody. Like I tried to tell somebody today, I was like, you know, the most important fucking thing that happened on the planet was losing 100,000 square kilometers of ice yesterday. It's nowhere. We talk about it. There, you know, like it's like we're the 1% that's hidden, just like the 1%, the elite that ruin everything and own everything and destroy everything, all for money. And we're the equal opposite of that. And we live in a fucking society that worships, these people fucking worship the wrong 1%. And then us 1% is talking about the real shit, following the money, the corruption, looking at the planet, economics, planetary destruction, collapse. And we're the crazy ones. And nobody, it's an insane fucking world, right?
I should straight jacket myself, right?
Yeah.
Do it for me.
I know, what a fucking time to be alive. And that's the thing that I don't understand either, is that this is more interesting than anything on Hollywood. You know, anything that, because, and they're out of fucking ideas anyway. Everything's been done as far as all that shit goes. This has never been done before. We're seeing shit happen that's never happened on the planet. We've taken out all the fucking, you know, all these fossil fuels and burned them into the atmosphere, and we're seeing, you know, the effects of that. And you know, because everything's not extinct yet, it's like global warming is total bullshit, conspiracy theory. Just like COVID, you have people dying of COVID, and the doctor's saying you're dying of COVID, and they're going, that's impossible. My president said that COVID doesn't exist. It's a hoax. How fucking crazy of a world that we live in right now. Just, I can't even, I think that's why I can't stop talking and think about it. I can't wrap my head around the fact that people are that dumb, that they just, they're dumb, and or they just can't accept reality because it's too bad, it's too hard, it's uh, too painful.
You brought up a really interesting point about Hollywood. I think somebody who studied sociology and how people interact and work and manipulate each other from the top down. I think it's interesting the way that disaster and apocalypse movies are made so as to misdirect from the reality and kind of focus on the fantasy. Like off the top of my head, I can think of, I was really into disaster movies as a kid, Twister, Armageddon, Deep Impact. The Day After Tomorrow, as a lot of people don't know, was a movie made off of a real paper that the Bush administration tried to cover up. And Roland Emmerich, I believe, is the name of the director. AMOC slowing down. Now, obviously, the AMOC is slowing down, and the climate change is so much worse than that one positive feedback, and we can't, we're not going to see the snowstorms. I mean, even though we did, there was a scene in The Day After Tomorrow where people were breaking the border fence and walking into Mexico because, there was refugees from the climate and it was snowing on the border. And we just saw a deep freeze in southern Texas where San Pedro Island, they had to go and grab the turtles because they were freezing in the water and they were going to die. Like, we're seeing disaster, but sorry, off a tangent a little bit. The interesting thing I wanted to bring up is that you don't see a movie about collapse or the apocalypse that is realistic to what, tiny circles and, people that predict what social unrest will look like actually will happen. You don't see anything about the grocery store not having food or big lines at the gas station. And then you hear down the line of cars, they're out of gas and people start freaking out. You don't see things like that in the media because my personal opinion is I don't think the main media want people to really undertake what apocalypse or a disaster will be to them. They just want people to fantasize about it like it's a Marvel movie where a superhero comes and saves everybody and we can go back and turn the TV off and go to bed and we're fine.
Yeah. And remind me what AMOC is too. I forget.
The Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation.
Okay.
It's one of the really complicated ocean patterns where heat is on this DNA style looping conveyor belt that goes around a lot of the world. And that actually travels, it cools, I believe it cools Europe and something else before
so is it fair to compare it to like an underground jet stream, like a water undersea?
Yeah. Jet streams are just above water currents, I guess.
Yeah.
There's no Earth Null School to look at. I mean, there could be data we're not knowledgeable of, that we know of at least, that shows the currents in the ocean the way that Null School shows the jet stream, because we don't really have a lot of sonar research that's able to scour 30,000 feet of deep ocean.
Yeah.
There's not really a way to tell. From what I know, the part of the ocean where fish can't see and it's pitch black and the pressure crushes you like a tin can, that part of the ocean is supposed to be really, really cold. But I've seen more research come out that deeper layers of the ocean are getting warmer. And I think Jim Massa talked about that on the last episode, the last interview he did in Nature Bats Last. The oceans are starting to stratify.
Yeah. Right. Phytoplankton are going extinct and they create 80% of our oxygen, right? So without them, we can't breathe, right? And I thought that kind of stuff was going to be later. But do you think that there's a chance that we're going to, some areas will not have enough oxygen and they'll suffocate? Or do you think it's going to be the heat, the wet bulb temperatures that's going to take people out? And of course, with all that, you've got worldwide hunger because there's no stores or no groceries, nothing at the grocery store. When we go dark, there goes all the power, so can't use your debit card. And the
There's a
store
lot of
can't keep the
lot of-
can't keep the food cold. It has to be cold or frozen or.
important. Thank you for bringing that up, because there's studies showing that refrigerators in Walmarts and Targets and all the grocery stores are leaking refrigerants.
Oh
CFC
yeah,
are bad for the ozone. And that was when, the ozone was a problem before I was born. But we kind of stopped caring about it being a problem, and it's more of a problem because not only are CFCs leaking out of refrigerators that are supposed to be, certified and supposed to be technologically safe and not pollutant, we're also seeing the same staggering hockey stick of nitrous oxide that we are with methane and CO2, and nitrous oxide directly depletes the ozone. So as you and I have talked about that, the sun just feeling hotter on your skin,
yeah,
and heating you up driving in the car without the air or the windows up, it just takes 15-20 seconds to get really hot in a car anymore because of how hot the sun feels. And I think that has a lot to do with the ozone getting Swiss cheesed.
yeah, yeah. It's so fucked. So where do you go from here? Like, what are your plans for the, not that we have a future, but for, in the near term, obviously, what are your, what are you going to be doing and how are you going to be getting along and
So one thing that I forgot to mention was that my dad is a musician, and I grew up with this love and affinity for music that I've had since I was a kid, and I play drums and guitar a lot. I have for over about 10 to 15 years each. So the pandemic really wrecked my local music, because I have a band called Grim Thinker that focuses a lot on, thinking grimly, thinking about doom. And we have a song called Marching Towards a Certain End that is about, you've ever seen one of Guy's presentations, he has this slideshow put up of people going like this, and they're walking off a cliff, like they're just walking right off the cliff and nobody sees it. So Marching Towards a Certain End is about that. We have a song called The Great Dying. So I'm hopefully going to play a social distance mask outside show in a month and a half. I have with my partner, we have we wrote down on poster board just a list of things that were kind of cheap and affordable, like going to the beach, going to ice cream. We just wrote a bunch of going to the art museum, just a bunch of stupid little things that we can do together, because it's like we have to accept that this is basically the time for us to go out and enjoy ourselves. While the world is telling me I need to get a career job and I need to work hard, I'm sitting there like, no, I don't. I'm going to go enjoy the last year or two of my life with the people I love and the people I'm friends with. I do love, as scary as the situation is, I love talking about the data. People get annoyed in some of our circles that we are obsessing over when and a timeline and data, but it's fun to me. I used to be into sports when I was younger, and it's kind of the same thing as following random numbers that don't mean anything other than the human connotation we've assigned.
that's a good point. Yeah.
It's the same kind of thing. You're just chasing something that you like doing until you die. But that one of those things for us happens to be kind of time clocking things falling apart because we're bored.
Yeah. That's a good point, man. I mean, I used to report on motocross. I mean, I still announce races and stuff. I'm announcing a race tomorrow, but I was, when I was younger, man, I was so into it. It was so exciting. It was just amazing. And the scene here in Georgia before, especially prior to 9/11, we had a good scene, dude. So the races were just in our local races. We'd have 400 riders, and they're just hauling ass, and they're so good. There's so many, we just had everything going on. It was fun, exciting, and I knew all these people, and we were all friends. And but yeah, I'd follow like, oh man, my friend got fucking third place at, St. Louis Supercross last night, man. That's so exciting. Now, give a shit. I'm going to announce a race tomorrow. I give a fuck. I'm not into it. I fake it. I watch, the television broadcast, but I'm not even into them. Like, I couldn't tell you who won last week, and I watched the fucking race. it just doesn't sit with me like it used to. But yet I can rattle off, climate numbers and and shit, and facts and stuff. And it's yeah, it's such a good point that you made, it's because this is relevant. When this wasn't as relevant and it wasn't about to kill us all, it was more relevant to, oh man, my friend's like, fucking eighth in points, man. He's gonna get a ride, he's gonna get some money, he's gonna, and it's cool. We're kind of friends. So you you like to see your friends do well and succeed. Especially in a professional sports atmosphere, especially if it's your favorite sport.
Yeah.
You know,
I felt that way too about, like, I grew up in Philadelphia. I grew up in a sports town with my parents and grandparents that had sports legacy. I was in the city the night the Eagles won the Super Bowl, and I was parading, and that was like a year after or two after I knew guys stuff. So I was just treating it as like, let me be a part of something that I'll never see again. And here, I'm a big basketball fan too, but watching Sixers games, they're tied for first place in the Eastern Conference. They're doing the best they've done in years, and I don't even care. I don't give a shit, because it's like, at the end of the day, once the basketball season's done and collapse happens, I can't really, enjoy those little things.
Yeah. And now too, we see those people because they are totally not on board with reality. They're still popping out kids because they got money, and oh, if my neighborhood burns, I'll just fucking move.
So many people. That's funny that you mentioned that, Joey, because sometimes when I'm out delivering food, I'll have NPR on, just because I like to kind of chuckle at how out of touch a lot of.
What do you have on?
NPR, like National Public Radio.
Oh yeah.
How even liberal quote unquote media is just so out of touch, and it just kind of makes me
disgusting.
So there was a part on talking about, this woman was talking about how it's more important to have two kids instead of one, because you can compare, like, kids are like, they come with their own instructions. So this kid is going to act differently than this one, and you can be a better parent interplaying how to handle with two different personality types. So I'm just like, you're just pushing us towards extinction. You just want us to get there faster. You just want us to get there faster.
Yeah. When I see people with young kids or pregnant women, I just want to walk up and punch them in the face, but I don't, because I'm not violent. I'm not a violent person, but I see the violence and the ignorance in people, and it's difficult. And of course, those people would hate me if I walked up to them and said, "Hey, it was really stupid of you to get pregnant, because we're all about to fucking die." I mean, right now, I'm pretty sure right now we're pretty safe to fuck without condoms, because 9 months, might not have to worry about that. But just on the precautionary principle, mask up, condom up, don't have fucking, I mean, I could use, I was in a really bad spot where I needed money. And last year I could have bred some reptiles. And I've always wanted to do that, and I never did. I finally have some animals that I've established enough, and now I've got some animals that are old enough and paired up. But I'm not gonna let them have babies. That's our iguanas. We have cyclura iguanas. They're $500 to $1,000 babies, and we could have a clutch of, I don't know, 10, 20. That's a lot of fucking money. That's if I had that coming in right now, I might not even have to work, and I'd just be like, I'm gonna enjoy these last days and just sell some lizards. No, man, putting a fucking living being, adding another living being on this planet is just pure suffering. And these are animals that cyclura lizards, iguanas live. I know a guy out in Arizona that's got one that's like 65 years old. The Australia Zoo, where Steve Irwin is from, and they just got awarded the world record, and it was like, I don't know, 60 or 63, and I was like, hey, John, this dude out in Arizona, and his animal came from a zoo, so it's documented. And he posted the papers from the zoo. So yeah, I'm like, you need to call up the world record. You know, these these animals are not gonna anything is not gonna live. Uh, it's not even gonna get old enough to even figure out how to reproduce. You know, not that I don't think animals get necessarily enjoyment out of that. It's just something they're programmed to do.
Right.
But
Yeah.
it's so sad. It's so fucked up. And one thing that I try to look at is the suffering. Wherever there's life, there's suffering because you've got to you don't have enough time to sleep. While you're asleep, someone can kill you. And as an animal, that means a predator, um, whatever. So I don't even understand how an animal can get good sleep. It's like, man, I'm just so tired. I got to go to sleep, but something can totally sneak up and kill me and eat me. Got to do it. There's just so much. You see animals how they live in fear, wild animals, and it's because of that. And that's a horrible existence, right? You have to live
Yeah.
like. And I'm sure in our before we murdered everything on the planet, there was a lot of shit that would get us too, right? So we kind of probably lived that stressful. And then as we tribed up and cleared land and kept the bears out and the lions out and
All
stuff like that,
tools.
then it was kind of game on for us to just, oh man, we're gonna eventually build cities and internet and world trade and dig up and burn off all the fossil fuels up into the atmosphere and life
Right.
will be great, right? We'll just keep doing that forever, right?
That's like the human height of humanity. It's like we're better at burning fossil fuels than any other.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man. Yeah, it's just I worry about everybody. I worry about all of our friends, from from the that some of us we've met, some of us haven't, but like I was saying earlier, we have nobody to talk to. We have nowhere to go. And it's fucking really hard. Like I had somebody that haven't talked to ever on the phone before call me up today and they really helped me out with some information. Uh, we talked more about the about this mask, this certain mask that I'm careful to talk about or post. But if anybody wants some more information, I can figure out a cheat to maybe I'll just you know give folks a little bit of information that's because you can't be connected to anything, right? Like if I say, hey Justin, I got this thing, it looks really good, here's the link for it, now I've helped you kill yourself, uh and if you do, I can be liable, right? What an insane system that we have. We can't even help each other, but a pet,
Only in a
totally
couple
fine, totally okay to take your
states.
animal to the vet and have it euthanized. We don't have, like, how the fuck do we treat our pets better than each other? It's
A few states that are pressing boundaries with that, but the qualifications are very strict. You either have to be very old, you have to be dying of a terminal, like you have to have proof that this very stringent set of requirements is met for them to follow through with that procedure.
yeah,
And if you're not in that one or two states that do that, there's no other, something to help you that way. I'm somebody that, spent a lot of time being depressed and suicidal as a kid. And I fought against that. And I'm not in that mindset anymore. So it was very deflating to find out after I finally didn't want to kill myself anymore that the world was going to kill me anyway.
yeah, yeah.
Kind of ironic.
It is. It is. Um, I was. If I'm having a bad day, um, I'm ready to go. and I need, but I'm not a violent person, so I can't shoot myself. I mean, maybe in a pinch I could, but I have to like, I have to do something that's totally nonviolent. I have to just go to sleep and not wake up. That's my thing. Um, but and I was looking into. I knew we were wiping out the planet. We were paving over everything, um, wiping everything out, and I knew we didn't have much time. And I couldn't believe that I couldn't find anything out about it. I couldn't believe there's nobody fucking talking about this. And any scientist that I could find was throwing out, even 2030 sounded really far out there. Granted, when Guy was saying 2030, that was years ago.
A while ago.
He's moved on to 2026, and knowing that that's when the top 1% that have underground bunkers, they have a full underground garden, lights, generators, electricity, plenty of gas, to fuel the generators, parts, spare generators. Like they probably have some fucking underground cities and shit, especially in the southern hemisphere. Because like our friend Kevin Hester, um, protested and led the victory of not having nuclear power plants in the southern hemisphere, right?
Yeah.
That's the place to go, especially if you for your bunker, because when a bunker here, you're still going to be surrounded by um,
Yeah.
the 450 plus nuclear power plants are going to melt down. Yeah, it's like it's so much to kind of realize and take in, that no matter, like, you can say, well, maybe this won't happen, but for sure all the other things are going to happen. So even if that one thing doesn't happen, it doesn't mean that you can, oh man, I'll survive, I'll adapt. You can't adapt to no oxygen. You can't adapt to no trees. You can't adapt to a dead ocean. You can't adapt to a dead land. Everything, like Guy talks about, everything is connected. We rely on other species, even species that we can't see, to cleanse the water, the river water, the lake water, the water we can breathe or drink. And yeah, in most of my lifetime, you couldn't drink from any of these, because that's why we have to buy bottled water or water filters, because we've just fucked it up so bad. But that was years ago, so I guess people are on this like thing. Well, that's just normal. It just becomes normal because we're still here, right? And but we're about to not be, and there's no filters that are going to clean the water for what's coming. Um, and even if there were, they're going to be sold out, and they're not going to be reproduced. There's going to be nobody to reproduce them. Yeah, I'm probably rambling on.
I always thought it was fishy that for a couple different places I've lived, that you really couldn't drink the kitchen water. You had to filter it.
Yeah.
Including my current apartment right now, because I live over the bridge to Philly. I live in South Jersey, and the water here's not good. And the air quality is just as bad as the city, because I live next to Philly. There's all sorts of those big white oil refinery things in South Jersey where they drop the oil off at the river and take it to a refinery. There's an incinerator 2 miles north of here that sometimes when it goes down, when it smells like eggs pretty bad in the air.
Oh fuck.
So many people live. There's a traffic circle. I showed you a picture of a couple days ago. I texted you. I was at this traffic. I was stopped. I wasn't, texting you. But the traffic was so bad that the whole circle was jammed up. And there's two next to each other, and the one by the river always smells like human waste, because like it's backed up with like you have to roll your windows up when you get to the traffic circle, because the smell will be like, oh, it's so gross.
Oh fuck.
So many people can't afford to move. We're all packed into these little sardine towns that it's just like the towns where the air smells, you got to deal with it. The towns where there's nowhere to park and the taxes are high and you can't drink the water, you just got to deal with it anymore. That's the sad thing. And all these people are dealing with all these environmental grievances and injustices like it's just the American way of life.
Yeah. Oh man. So I think we've covered a lot. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about, Justin?
Um, no, I think we covered a lot too. I don't think I really answered your question about a prediction, but I could be wrong, but I want to say that even if the ice does melt this year, there's going to be some couple months of time before all the methane spews out, where there will be like a lag before it heats us.
Yeah.
And at that point, we could go civil unrest. We could go society breaks down because enough people figure this out, and then the news doesn't matter, and your
That's a
job
good point.
clocking in don't matter anymore.
That's a really good point.
That,
But I kind of think that people are so disconnected that they'll be like, well, the ice is gone. We're still here. Everything's fine.
that's very true. That
But
might give us more time, though. The more people that are, nothing's going on while the world's burning down, that's just more time because they're still running in the hamster wheel that is
it creates.
teetering Jenga block tower afloat somehow.
Yeah.
So maybe the amount of people that are dumbed down to everything are giving us an edge, but at the same time, the exponential nature of everything tells me that once there's this kind of catalyst, this kind of world changing, countries start collapsing, we could have the big one on the West Coast that has nothing to do with climate change, and that spurs the societal collapse. I think it was Ken Avendor, the Nature Bat's last guest. He drew a really awesome illustration of a Jenga tower. It was pulling different species out of it, like krill, and they're all extinct species pulled out. I think that was such a perfect analogy. I think Kevin Hesser's mentioned that too. It's just
he shares that. He
you can
shares
only
that.
pull so many species out of the
That
Jenga.
meme a lot.
We fall down with it,
No, that's good shit. He's done a lot of really good artwork and memes on climate.
That's how I really
good
to wrap everything up, though.
I love the one going off the cliff. I think it's time to start talking about climate change or a solution to climate change.
Yeah, the car, I love that too. They're in the air, like maybe we should hit the brakes.
Yeah, at that point you hit the brakes and the tires stop spinning, but you're still falling. So there's
how do you turn a rocket off mid liftoff?
right. Oh,
like it's already blowing through millions of gallons of fuel, shooting hundreds of miles an hour into the sky, but everyone's like, yeah, slow it down. And for some reason, the last year, that's one thing we can talk about really quick. Over the last year, I've learned so much stuff about how toxic renewable energy is. I
know
30 gallons of oil going to every wind turbine to lubricate it. When a wind turbine dies, the spinners, the turbines are this toxic, I forget the word, this carbon fiber substance that has to be disposed of. It's toxic. I was just seeing this thing that solar panels are starting to die out, and they're really toxic e-waste because there's nowhere to put it. It's just like, it's like the people that thought of renewable energy was like, let's just trick people into using less energy until we die and they realize they've been duped.
Yeah.
I feel about like nuclear energy and all that shit. So,
yeah, exactly.
Concrete intensive to build a nuclear plant. It takes, I think Pauline has mentioned that too. It takes 40 to 50 years just to be carbon neutral, and then takes another 50 years to decommission the damn thing. And people my age are going around pushing nuclear power on Facebook.
Yeah.
People believe that shit. I hope somebody watches this that's in their 20s and totally reevaluates their life on what they think renewable energy is doing for us.
Yeah.
I don't hope anything, but that one thing I will hope for.
Yeah. That's one thing that, so I wanted to also, welcome you and make the announcement too. And I meant to do this earlier, but I'm better late than never. That you're gonna join me on collapsing with Casey as co-host. I think with that way we can knock out some more interviews, and because Guy and Pauline and Kevin, Hester, and some others, I know that we can pretty much talk to every day. But they already put so much information out that I don't want to rehash the same shit with them. I want to kind of work their brains and talk about stuff that on maybe a higher level, and really put their knowledge to more of a test as well, because they know so much. Especially Guy. I mean, Guy, I pull no punches. He is the most important whistleblower of all time, because nobody is talking about this the way he is with the facts he has and presents, and has everything to back it up, and we see it. Um, and I think people like that, like us too, enjoy talking to people who get it. It's almost like getting stuff off our chest that we know, that helps us, get us through our day of mundane bullshit a lot of times.
Yeah. And shout out to you, Joey, because I feel like you said, Guy and Pauline and Kevin are just a small faction doing everything they can, working against everybody else in the world, and the odds are pitted against the 1%, like you said, of doomers, I'll call them, that are really more realist than doomers. I get called a doomer all the time still, and I'm like,
Yeah,
well, that's what I am. That's cool. It just reminds me of doom metal or death metal. Like that is all I love anyway. You're making me happier. Like,
yeah. And
yeah,
keeping snakes is kind of doomy too, right? Like, who the fuck is the
snakes are
weirdo guy
awesome.
that
That's
has
why
snakes?
I love snakes. But I think it's important that we have this kind of group, that we stick together. And I refuse to believe we're an echo chamber, because the people that talk about this stuff fight amongst each other about little details so hard. How could you even say that's an echo chamber? But I think it's important that more people are taking the initiative, myself included and you included, to share this information in a way that is presentable and palatable to somebody like me, that really, I would read some papers by somebody like Peter Wadhams, and once you get into equations and delta over y equals this to x extent, like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So be able to translate that information to people like me and you that just have everyday jobs, that are concerned about the environment, as you should be, as a good human being would, that we can inform people, and we can help Guy and Pauline and Kevin, who have been doing tremendous work, that have, I can't even tell you how much. I can't think of a good adjective to tell you how much respect I have for these people.
Yeah.
It's limitless respect, because they're just working so hard through this. I just want to be a part of that too, and contribute towards people knowing, like, the truth about things, about the climate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyone that wants to join us in that journey, like, welcome aboard, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh man, like Guy talks about, it's not an easy road, but when you know what you know, and you're a realist or a doomer, you can't turn it off. Like we were talking about earlier, we can't just watch any shitty movie or TV show where they dub in the laughter. Ooh, comedy. Everything they say is funny because they dub in laughter. Like, that shit annoys me, and it always has. I'm just like, this is fucking so overproduced and stupid. It's not even fucking funny. Even if somebody actually does fuck up and actually say or do something that is kind of funny to me, and it clicks, the whole thing is so fucking annoying. I can't even laugh at that, because I'm just like, this is fucking dumb. And one thing I also wanted to say, along with welcoming you aboard, I wanted to do an interview with you, so that's like a good introduction for our listeners to learn about you and your story. and I think you're gonna help out so much, and we'll be able to knock out some really wicked content, really, and more often, because knowing that we don't have much time, I get a lot of enjoyment out of these. Putting them out there for people to see. That 10 or so people that message me and say, "Man, that interview changed my life." Really helped me.
Awesome.
Um, you know, not feel guilty about thinking about having to commit suicide when things get really bad, and um, not having to feel guilty about that. And it's fucked up that we live in a world like that, but we do. So we have to deal with it, and and face it. But it's only us that are willing to do that. And so I hope these shows in the past and future help people. And I also wanted to say that my last episode, I talked to Joe Black. He's come out now with, if you go to his Facebook page, Joe Black on Facebook, look him up and read what he's saying now. He says his real name, tells a little bit more about his real story, Paul Punta, or Paul Punt, sorry. Um, uh, and I asked for people to, if you can reach out and help this guy out. He's going to ride his motorcycle into a tree that has a wall behind it. So if he misses a tree, he'll hit the wall at full speed without a helmet when his time comes up. And his time's going to be up in April. And it was more of a financial thing, really, even though he knows, and I don't think his timeline is off very far. I don't think Jeffrey's timeline was off very far. I hate to say that, knowing that Jeffrey didn't didn't do it because of climate. It was relationship, like we talked about, but still, I don't think it's very far off. And
On that, Joe, I don't think Mike Rupert's death was that far off, and that was 7 years ago.
you're right. You're right, man. Fuck. You know, I would have I would have really appreciated having him around for another 7 years. He would be so helpful now, but at the same time, we don't know. He smoked like a chimney. He may have also had some health issues that were equal, an equal or even greater
He was
part of
struggling
it.
with the mental health aspect of this, as most of us are. And
Yeah,
maybe a bit easier to understand climate change and collapse when your mental situation has already been broken down. You've already been in this place where everything seems hopeless.
right.
It's
Yes.
it was I was a depressed child growing up in the city in areas that weren't entirely safe to be outside, and feeling really alone and isolated when I was a kid. And I got beat up
Yeah.
in school in Philly and all that. And it kind of just clicked, having these kind of stressful instances growing up, that like, and maybe it's not just me. Maybe everything
Maybe.
is connected in a way that things are actually going down the tubes.
Right. Yep. Yeah. That's the same with me, man. I mean, you know, I 3 years old, I remember being forced to eat my own vomit by my, not a brother or sister, my own goddamn parents. Life didn't get a whole lot better after that. I ate some more vomit and still didn't get any
Minimally
better.
better. Now you eat it on your own volition, right?
Yeah.
Now you
So I've
choose.
been there too. Like, I know that, having, I had 13 jobs when I was a kid because I was announcing races, and, all these different tracks, and having a regular job. And, and then I started doing uh, publishing my own newspaper. So I had all these jobs. And I still was like fucking renting a $400 bedroom a month from a friend, or maybe I didn't have rent that month, and I was just like, oh fuck, I gotta find somebody I can crash with for a month until I can announce some more races and save some more money or something. Um, yeah, it's just completely fucked. And I wanted to say that your situation is pretty dire. It's not as dire as Joe's obviously was. But people reached out, man. That's the fucking beauty of you know helping people with these episodes and just being able to be relatable to people who are going through this and see the writing on the wall and understand the writing on the wall, especially when they're the only ones in their family or friend circle that does. He's paid up at a B&B and through the end of the month. Now, at the end of the month, and money for food and stuff, he doesn't have, but he's at least got a roof. We've got a roof over his head for, you know, and when I say we, I mean so many people helped out. It's been really beautiful, and I'm proud to be a part of that in whatever way that was. But you know, he cried out, and people, you know, people responded, and that's what you know, that's what we need. Because like Pauline says, man, we're we're at the point where we have to take care of each other. We can't let each other go early because they don't have rent or mortgage payment this month. You know, it's it's we're right at the point to where that's not going to matter anymore. And when that does, um, at least give us the dignity to wither away in our homes. You know, whether it's wet bulb or we get robbed for our can of beans,
Wherever it is.
you know? Yeah, so that's important, man. And I want to make sure that that you and your girl are okay. And because you've got so much to contribute, you've got so much to add that people are gonna love you as a co-host, I think. And you know, together we'll make sure that you know that as long as the internet's on and we have power, you know, we're gonna take care of each other.
I would rather put my, you know, hard-earned education that cost me so much money into diving down into some books and papers and doing research and sharing it with, you know, you and your listeners and anyone else that's particularly interested. I'd rather do that than waste my time trying to get some $100,000 job with a suit and a Ferrari and never be happy with anything I'm doing ever. I don't want to do that. I'm telling that to you, Mom.
I know, man.
That's for you, Mom. I'm not doing your job that you want me to do.
Oh, yeah, it's heavy shit, man. Well, dude, I gotta I think we can end it on that note. I think we had a good talk, and I think people will dig this. And you know, thanks again to everybody. Not only reached out to Joe, but I was in the same predicament. I was down to my last dollars. I was scared to fucking death. You know, I promised my wife that she would never work again as long as I have this job. Well, I lost that job. Well, we have $20,000 of 401k savings from this job, and we're about to die soon. We'll be fine. Well, we're still here. The money was running out, and I was getting kind of nervous, and people helped me out. And I've had almost $2,000 in donations
Awesome.
from people.
I can confidently say
that's a month. That buys me a fucking month, you know. And then I got my job back, so I'm like, hey, anybody needs to be repaid back or whatever, I got it. I got this. Yeah. And at least until I get fired again. So.
Right. That's one thing I can say, and I'm not embarrassed or shy about this or anything. Even when we stimulus check, I've never owned more than $2,100 in my existence.
Me, yeah.
I don't have half of that right now. So I mean, and I'm moving in a couple months. Again, I've moved like 3 or 4 times because of the pandemic situation and the job situation, and you know, I'm not worried about it. It's a little bit frightening, but the ice and the methane and the temperatures and every species going extinct is more frightening to me than picking an apartment in 3 or 4 months that I'm going to have to like fight tooth and nail to work to own and survive in. You know, I'm up for the challenge. Let's do it.
Oh fuck, that's awesome, man. Justin, I love you, buddy. We're
love you too, man.
I want to say we're gonna get through this, but no, we're not. But until
let's just get through what we can, and then whatever else happens, right?
Oh man, let's drink to that.
This has been an absolute pleasure, though, Joey. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. And I think I did mention earlier, but I want to remind everybody, check out Justin's interview with Peter Miller. Um, Peter is a if you don't know, Peter is a psychiatrist in in Canada, and he knows what we know. And so he's really cool about when he talks to people, getting to the psychological side of things, and and talking about the facts and what sharing what we know. I love his channel. I love his work. Um, and your interview, um, like you and our friend Dan, um, Dan and Beth Block and Daniel Reich. Sorry, Daniel Reich is his last name. His interview was just so badass. And Monica Lee is another good interview that he did, and that's an older interview from over a year ago, maybe closer to two. But oh man, just really really good content and stuff. But so we'll sign off with that and go check out Peter's channel too. And thanks so much, dude.
Thank you, man.
Thanks.